Welcome to Ellery Queen's Mystery Magazine's Fiction Podcast. I'm EQMM's editor, Janet Hutchings. This month we present a holiday tale from across the globe. Since 2003, EQMM has featured a story and translation in each issue of the magazine. In this year's January-February issue, that story, A Christmas Tale, was contributed by Fei Wu, an author, translator, and literary agent from Shanghai, China. It was translated by Josh Pachter, a longtime contributor to our magazine of both translations and fiction. Here is Josh Pachter reading Beijingle All the Way by Fei Wu from the January-February 2020 EQMM.
From the 40th floor, the city beyond the huge glass windows of my office lies shrouded in snow. Far beneath my feet, the taillights of the vehicles on the East Second Ring Road trace intricate red lines like wounds in the night. Today is my how manyth consecutive day of working overtime, from early morning till 10 p.m. or later. They say that Beijing's white-collar workers devote plenty of time to earning their pay, but have little time left over to spend it. As a drone in the new media industry, I have to agree. Our company moved to Yintai, Soho a year ago, and it's the only new media marketing agency here. Most companies would love to have their offices in Yintai, Soho, but the rent of 8 yuan per square meter per day puts it out of their reach. To put it bluntly, the companies that can afford offices in this building are very rich. Those unable to pay the rent are quickly evicted. The chemical company next door, for example. Today is their last day in Yintai. I happen to know the founder, Zhao Ji, who graduated from Peking University 2 years ahead of me. The day I began to work here, Zhao Ji welcomed me with a cup of tea at the open-air cafe on the roof, as if the world lay at our feet. Now, only 1 year later, we'll be saying our goodbyes. Commerce is a cruel realm. Success, its only king. Shortly after 11 o'clock, I leave the office, which is still brightly lit. As usual, I drive to a roadside kebab restaurant near the Dayangfang Bridge in the South Fifth Ring Road for a late-night snack. No matter how our circumstances change, we take comfort from the same few pleasures: food, wine, friends. Driving through Beijing in the snow is dangerous business. According to the radio, there have already been several accidents on the ring roads tonight. I head south, keeping my speed below 40 kilometers per hour. According to the traffic information boards overhead, all 7 rings are badly congested. It's almost midnight by the time I get to the kebab restaurant, an outdoor shack cobbled together from wooden poles and plastic sheets. A string of incandescent bulbs hanging from bare wires illuminates the place. Despite the heavy snow, there's a happy vibe in the air: laughter, clinking bottles, the smells of cumin powder and cheap liquor. Beau Jui, the 40-something owner, knows what I like to eat. The usual, he says from behind the grill, surrounded by sparks and smoke. I nod and take a seat, listening to the hourly newscast on the radio, and then the beginning of my favorite program. Welcome to the Flying Fish Show on FM 95.7. It's Christmas Eve, so we're sending out a Jingle Bells greeting to all our friends out on the roads. Drive safely. The familiar American holiday song swells into the bitter night. Beau and I both enjoy the Flying Fish Show. These days, radio isn't as popular as it used to be, but the host, who calls himself Mr. Fish, still gets a fair number of people calling into his live midnight broadcast. Half an hour later, the kebab restaurant is almost empty. Beau turns over a piece of cardboard attached to the plastic sheet entrance to read, "Closed." He comes over to my table and sits across from me, placing his portable radio between us. Edelweiss from The Sound of Music is playing, and its lovely melody blends with the sound of snow falling on the plastic ceiling, producing a very special effect. "You know what music and snow have in common?" he asks. I think for a while, but I have no answer to his question. The song ends, and Mr. Fish takes a call from a listener, a taxi driver with an unusual passenger. What follows is the story told by the cabbie, who identifies himself as Old Warrior. On Christmas Eve, he had hoped to get home early to prepare a present for his daughter, but the tuition for her private primary school would soon be due, so he decided to work a few more hours. Around 10:30 p.m., his mobile phone rang. A passenger needed to be picked up at Yintai Soho on the East Second Ring Road. That catches my attention. What a coincidence, I think. That's where I work. My interest piqued. I lean forward and listen. Old Warrior's passenger was going to Sakura Garden, a community only 7 kilometers from Yintai Soho. But the passenger asked Old Warrior to fill his tank before making the pickup. This was a puzzling request, since it would only be a 20-minute drive in traffic. But Old Warrior stopped at the Sinopec on Jishui North Street and pumped 300 yuan of number 92 gasoline. Old Warrior knew Yintai Soho well and was familiar with the habits of the building's white-collar workers, most of whom got off work between 8 and 10 in the evening. He arrived at the pickup point on time, at 11. A man in a black trench coat stood beneath the glass overhang at the Yintai Soho entrance. He seemed preoccupied and didn't notice the cab's arrival. Old Warrior blinked his headlights, which caught his passenger's attention. The man carried a backpack and dragged a wheeled silver suitcase. Old Warrior got out and opened the trunk, but the passenger insisted on stowing the suitcase in the front seat. When Old Warrior hoisted the bag, he found that it was unexpectedly heavy. Back behind the wheel, Old Warrior suggested they take city streets rather than the Third Ring Road. There would be more traffic lights that way, but given the road conditions, it would probably be faster. No, the passenger said, he preferred the ring road. As they were about to drive off, the passenger changed his mind. "Let's go to Peking University," he said. "Ah, not Sakura Garden?" "Do as I tell you," the passenger said, "and please turn off the heater. Your car is too hot." The passenger settled into the back seat and put on headphones, which told Old Warrior that the man didn't want to be disturbed. When the cab took the on-ramp onto the third ring, Old Warrior noticed that the passenger wasn't buckled in. He pantomimed fastening a seatbelt, but the passenger ignored him. Old Warrior's impression of his fare was getting worse. The drive from Yintai Soho to Peking University is 18 kilometers via the East Second Ring Road, the North Second Ring Road, and the North Fourth Ring Road. After 40 minutes in the increasingly violent snowstorm, they pulled up at the university's east gate. Peking University is my alma mater. It seemed as if Old Warrior's story had been custom written to intrigue me. From Bose Radio, the account continues. The guard shack at the gate was brightly lit, and the passenger declined to get out of the cab. Instead, he gazed silently at the snow outside the window. Old Warrior waited patiently. At last, the passenger instructed him to drive on to Yuyuantan Park. Old Warrior realized that it was shaping up to be a long night. When I was a student at Peking University, I went to Yuyuantan Park every spring to admire the cherry blossoms. In those days, I liked nature very much. Oyama, Yoshino, Yai Red Branch, Edo. I knew all the varieties of cherry trees. The distance between Peking University and Yuyuantan Park is about 11 kilometers, which took Old Warrior some 40 minutes through the snow. The park was closed and deserted at this hour, and by now Old Warrior was feeling confused. Since the university campus is open around the clock, it had not seemed unusual to go there so late at night. But why would anyone want to go to a park that was already shut down for the night? At the park entrance, the strange passenger remained seated. He stared out the window for a while, then leaned back in his seat and closed his eyes. A few minutes later, he gave Old Warrior their next destination, Tangye Temple, in the western suburbs of Beijing. This immediately made Old Warrior nervous. Tangye Temple is in the foothills of Tangye Mountain in the Mentugu district, the westernmost suburb of Beijing, more than 30 kilometers from the city center. It is where the old Beijingers go to pray for good luck and health. I've been to Tangye Temple twice myself, when I was pregnant with my son. At that time, my relationship with Zhu Jun was still very good, and the joyful anticipation of welcoming a new life into our family filled our hearts. There are a lot of rules for those who drive night cabs. One is to avoid adult males who want to go to the outer suburbs. The reason is obvious. Such passengers sometimes turn out to be intent on robbery. Old Warrior hesitated, but finally decided to do as his passenger had requested. The man didn't look like a violent type, and why would someone who worked at Yintai Soho need to rob a lowly cab driver? Old Warrior had heard that people employed in that building made more money in an hour than a cabbie could earn in an entire month. He checked his dashboard clock and saw that it was 12:30 a.m. The road from the city to Tangye is very good. Once you turn off National Highway 108 onto Lanji Road, though, you begin to climb into the mountains, and Old Warrior almost lost control of his car more than once on the tight switchback turns, made more slippery than usual by the snow. In his rearview mirror, Old Warrior saw the passenger repeatedly looking at his watch. It was an analog watch, obviously expensive. There were almost no other cars on the road, and they came to the base of Tangye Mountain at 1:20 a.m. A blanket of fresh snow covered the road. Old Warrior could make out the irregular black and white pattern of the mountain slope through his windshield. An LCD readout gave the temperature inside and outside the car in both Celsius and Fahrenheit. It was minus 17 degrees Celsius, or 1 degree Fahrenheit, outside, 5 degrees Celsius, or 41 degrees Fahrenheit, on the inside. "Are you cold?" asked Old Warrior. "Should I turn the heat back on?" "No." Old Warrior parked in the lot outside the temple. There was no one to be seen, no lights visible within the temple. For the first time since he had entered the cab, the passenger opened the back door and stepped out. He did not take his suitcase. "He got out of the car," exclaims Mr. Fish, "in minus 17 degrees weather." "Yes," says Old Warrior. "He's standing at the temple gate right now. Otherwise I wouldn't have been able to call you. He hasn't done anything exactly wrong, but his behavior has upset me." "Has he said where he wants to go next? It's almost 1:30 in the morning. Is your daughter home alone?" "Yeah." Old Warrior's voice trembles. "I don't know what he's thinking. Wait, he's knocking on the gate." "On the gate?" asks Mr. Fish. "Now he's given up. He's coming back. I have to go." "The roads are slick, Old Warrior. Please drive carefully. It's Christmas Eve. Be safe, and give my regards to your daughter." Mr. Fish breaks the connection and addresses the audience. "Well, folks, what an interesting story that was. I don't think I've ever heard anything quite like it. We're going to break for a commercial message, but don't touch your dial. We'll be right back. Part 3. I light a cigarette, and the smoke carries my thoughts skyward. What can Old Warrior's mysterious passenger possibly be up to? Yintai Soho, Peking University, Yuyuantan Park, Tanger Temple. I'll bet there isn't another person in Beijing who has traveled this route today. I do the math. They've driven about 60 kilometers. Since the passenger instructed the cabbie to fill his tank, they must be going on to yet another destination. Perhaps there's been a kidnapping? I'm surprised to hear this comment from Bo. He's been cleaning up the restaurant, and I didn't realize he was listening to Old Warrior's story. Before the passenger got in the cab, Bo continues, Old Warrior opened the trunk for his suitcase. But the passenger put his bag on the front seat, which suggests that it must contain some very important item or items the man doesn't dare let out of his sight. And Old Warrior said the bag was heavy. I figure an ordinary suitcase could hold about 2 million yuan in cash, which would weigh more than 20 kilos. And don't forget that the passenger put on headphones as they drove off. That would allow him to receive instructions from a kidnapper, who sends him on a wild goose chase to shake off any possible pursuit. By changing the location for the ransom payment again and again, the actual route will far exceed the straight-line distance from start point to end point, so the passenger told Old Warrior to fill the tank before picking him up. Doesn't it sound just like the way a kidnapper would arrange to have a ransom delivered? To avoid being tracked, you keep changing the drop-off point. We ought to tell someone, I say, anxiously. Who, the police? I'm not kidding. I am, laughs Bo. When the passenger got out of the car at the temple, he left the suitcase behind. He wouldn't have done such a thing if he were paying a ransom. That Bo, he's always kidding. As the flying fish show is winding down, Old Warrior calls back. Mr. Fish, we're at the China-Japan Friendship Hospital. My passenger has left the car again. The hospital must be closed by now. What's he up to? I don't know. The emergency receiving area is still lit, but everything else is dark. And he hasn't gone inside. He's just standing by the door. It doesn't look like he's waiting for anyone. In the background, I can hear an ambulance siren, but I can't tell if it comes from outside the radio studio or over Old Warrior's phone. He's just standing there? Right. Did he take his suitcase this time? No. Mr. Fish pauses, then asks, Is this his last stop? No. Before he got out of the cab, he said he wants to go to the airport next, via the Jingping Expressway. To the airport this late? Yes. Very strange, Mr. Fish sighs. Okay, Old Warrior, say, can I get your license plate number? In the brief silence that follows, we hear the sound of footsteps in the snow. I have to go, Mr. Fish. He's coming back. He hurriedly says his plate number, an easy one to remember, and then the line goes dead. Bo ponders for a moment, then asks me, Fanjue, does your car have a full tank of gas? Almost, I say. I filled it this morning on the way to work. Then let's go, Bo urges. Old Warrior may be in trouble. I'm an adult, and I'm not used to being ordered about in such a way, but I react like an obedient child and lead Bo over to my red Mercedes GLK. After our divorce, Ji Jun got custody of our son, and I got the car. A few short hours ago, I was just a typical Yintai Soho drone. If anyone had told me I would sail off with the owner of a kebab restaurant to rescue a stranger I'd never met, I would have said he was crazy. Now, it seems that the crazy person is me. Where are we going? I demand, turning the key in the ignition. The capital airport. says Bo. I switch on the wipers, and they squeak loudly as they clear the windshield of accumulated snow. As we head northeast toward the airport, Bo explains his reasoning. Let's start with the suitcase, he says. The passenger put it on the front seat instead of in the trunk. This suggests two possibilities. First, the contents of the suitcase are very valuable, so the passenger doesn't want the bag to leave his sight. Second, he may need to use the contents while they drive. Couldn't this just be his usual practice, I wonder? Perhaps, but let's hold that thought for a moment. Bo continues his analysis. The route chosen by the passenger seems noteworthy. Old Warrior suggested taking city streets, but the passenger instructed him to take the ring road, even though the weather has caused heavy traffic on the expressways, and there may have been many accidents. Why did the passenger insist on a slower and more dangerous route? Again, I reply, this may simply have been force of habit. Would a successful man who works at Yin Tai Soho refuse to wear a seatbelt, though? I have no response to that. To get from the hospital to the airport, people usually take the Beijing-Chengde Expressway and the Jingping Expressway, or otherwise the North Third Ring Road. Do you know the difference between those two routes? The expressway is faster? You probably don't do much driving outside the city center at night, do you? The provincial highways have a lot of truck traffic after dark, especially around midnight. Why? Because there are no patrols, so no one checks to see if the trucks are overloaded. This time of year, people are stocking up on coal for the winter months, and the freight rates go way up, so the drivers overload their semis and travel by night. How do you know all this? Ignoring my question, Bo adds, and many sections of the highway are poorly lit, so visibility is bad, not to mention that reaction times are slower in the dark than during the daylight hours. As if in response to this last comment, my car bumps on the uneven road. To make matters even worse, it's snowing, and the roads are slick. If a driver makes a mistake, the consequences could be very serious. Now, think about it. Old Warrior has been driving for 3 hours. He's fatigued. The roads are dangerous. What would you say the odds are that he might have an accident? High, I'd imagine. And what if that's exactly what the passenger is counting on? What do you mean? Perhaps the passenger wants there to be a crash. A death wish? Perhaps. I find this hard to believe. Wouldn't there be easier ways for him to kill himself? Maybe he wants to die in an accident for insurance reasons. But how can he guarantee there'll be an accident? He can't guarantee it. But remember, when he got in the cab, he had Old Warrior turn off the heat. It's snowing, minus 17 degrees. What does that have to do with anything? Does he intend to freeze to death? A car heater doesn't only provide warmth, it also circulates the air inside the vehicle. Otherwise, a car is an enclosed space. Once the oxygen in the passenger compartment is depleted, the consequences are obvious. Even with the windows closed and the heater off, surely there'll be plenty of oxygen. But don't forget the suitcase. He may need to use the contents while they drive? You have a good memory. What could you put into a suitcase to create an oxygen-deficient environment? Dry ice? Solid carbon dioxide, or dry ice, is 1.7 times more dense than ordinary ice. Even if the suitcase isn't full, it would be heavy. And another reason to shut off the heat would be to delay the sublimation of the dry ice. To create an opportunity for the oxygen to deplete, the passenger orders Old Warrior to drive to the university, the park, the temple, the hospital. We have to contact Old Warrior. The producer of the Flying Fish Show must have his number. No, that's no good. If I'm right, he won't answer his phone. Why not? Because the passenger won't let him. So what do? We have to stop the cab on its way to the airport. Well, how do we do that? The China-Japan Friendship Hospital is about 20 kilometers from the expressway's toll station. We're about 29 kilometers from the station. Maybe we can catch up with him there. Will we make it? He'll have worse traffic than us, says Bo, but you need to speed up. We drive on in silence until we reach the Beijing-Shengde Expressway toll station. Bo jumps out of the car and consults with the toll collectors. Only 2 taxis have come through in the last half hour, he says excitedly as he slides in beside me. The last one only 2 minutes ago. We have a chance to intercept him. How good is your car insurance? Part 4. The expressway is as bad as Bo predicted. At least 4 of the 6 lanes in each direction are crowded with dump trucks and semis. Thanks to the snow, the road surface is very slippery, and my headlights only illuminate a short stretch of the pavement before us. The taillights of the other vehicles are also obscured, appearing like the flickering flames of distant fires. Road signs are nearly invisible, hidden by the thickness of the falling snow. In these conditions, I don't dare to pass. Rear-ending a car or truck could be fatal. But we have an advantage. At this time of night, taxis are few and far between on the interprovincial highway, so Old Warrior's cab will be conspicuous. Up ahead, says Bo, after about 10 minutes have passed. A yellow-green Hyundai with blue and white roof lights. That has to be him. I click on my high beams and accelerate, but when we get close enough to make out the license plate, we're disappointed. It's not the number we're looking for. Taking our lives in my hands, I pass it, and sure enough, there's no one inside except the driver. As time goes by, I become more and more tense. A suitcase full of dry ice would turn Old Warrior's cab into a moving time bomb. I don't know if we'll ever catch up with them. Perhaps they've already crashed, or perhaps we'll be the ones to cause the fatal collision. Once again, it's Bo who spots the cab, another Hyundai, sandwiched between 2 trucks in the leftmost lane. That's him, says Bo, the pitch of his voice rising. Pass him on the right and pull to a stop in front of him. Are you nuts? Stop? On the highway? It's the only way. Look, their heads are nodding. They're already drowsy. I crane forward and peer through the falling snow, and yes, it seems to me that both the driver's head and the head of the passenger in the back seat are bobbing. I don't know what to do, I shout. Cut them off. I pull abreast of the cab and flash my lights, but there's no way to know if Old Warrior notices. I push down on the gas and swing the wheel to the left, putting the front end of my car into the space between the cab and the truck it's following. The impact is impossibly loud and jarring, and then the world goes silent, and time seems to stop. Good job, Feng Shui. It's Bo. You did it. I open my eyes, but there's nothing to see except the falling snow. Bo opens his door, and the freezing wind fills my car with thick white flakes. Where are you going? I shout. To check on Old Warrior. I jump out and follow him back to the Hyundai, which has rebounded off my rear bumper into the guardrail that separates the 2 directions of traffic. Its left headlight is broken, its entire front end crumpled. I can't open the door on the driver's side. Old Warrior's head is buried in his airbag, and he's not moving. Bo opens the back door on the passenger's side. The passenger's face is bloody, but he's still breathing. Over Bo's shoulder, I'm shocked to recognize the man's identity through the blood that streams from a gash on his forehead. Xiao Ji? When he sees me, he mumbles 2 words. Thank you. While I call the police and the rescue squad, Bo checks on Old Warrior, who is unconscious but apparently unhurt, then unlatches the suitcase in the front seat. There are some articles of clothing inside and a small styrofoam box leaking white smoke. By the time the police arrive, the smoke will have dissipated and there will be no trace of dry ice left. Part 5. Old Warrior's passenger, Zhao Ji, is the founder of the chemical company next door to my own firm's offices, and that explains a lot. In our conversations at the open-air cafe on the Yintai Soho roof, for example, he told me that he met his wife at Peking University, that they often visited Yueyuantan Park and Tangye Temple, and that their daughter was born at the China-Japan Friendship Hospital. Zhao Ji is whispering something in Bo's ear. Bo nods and touches the man's shoulder, then comes over to me. Let's go, he says. The police and an ambulance will be here any moment. Will they be okay? They'll be fine. Neither of them is badly hurt. Where are we going? Sakura Garden. Why? Have you forgotten what day it is? It's almost 5 o'clock when we arrive at Sakura Garden East Street, but I'm not at all sleepy. The snow has stopped. To my surprise, there are many pedestrians out on the streets. Some seem to be on their way home, while others are ready to begin the new day. Their faces are hidden behind the white exhalations of their breath. Bo instructs me to park in front of an all-night convenience store. He goes in and buys a roll of red and white striped wrapping paper. Who are you giving gifts to? I ask. A child who still believes in Santa Claus. What child? Old Warrior's daughter. Don't you remember? He told Mr. Fish he wanted to be home early to prepare a gift for his little girl. I see, I say. But I don't see. Something's wrong. Bo is wrapping a child's dress in the red and white paper. I remember him taking the dress from the suitcase in the taxi's front seat. But why is Bo wrapping clothes from Zhao Ji's box for Old Warrior's daughter? And isn't it a remarkable coincidence that Old Warrior lives in Sakura Garden, the same place Zhao Ji originally told him to go? The more I think about it, the stranger it all seems. And then I remember something that Old Warrior said. The passenger was wearing an expensive analog watch. But how could Old Warrior have seen that it was expensive and analog from the driver's seat, with the passenger sitting behind him in the dark? Wouldn't only the watch's owner know those details? I stare at my reflection on the inside of the windshield and suddenly realize something else. Old Warrior said he saw the passenger knock at the door of Tangye Temple, but it was dark. There were no lights in the temple. The passenger was wearing a black trench coat, and the cab's driver couldn't have seen what was happening at the temple gate anyway. He would only have seen his own face reflected on the windshield. Then, was it Zhao Ji himself who made those calls to the radio station, pretending to be Old Warrior and deliberately revealing information only he could have known to Mr. Fish? Was he hoping some listener would be clever enough to see through his deception and brave enough to rescue him on Christmas Eve, to redeem him from the depths of despair and return him to his family? Driven to thoughts of suicide by the failure of his company, had he ordered an innocent cabbie to take him on a tour of the important landmarks of his life, so he could enjoy one last look at the good times that were now at an end? What a heavy burden he must have been bearing. Was that why he thanked me? And did Bo know the truth from the very beginning? As I wait for Bo to return, I consider the chain of events that made Zhao Ji choose to end his life. His company failed because he made their suppliers money on P2P products that later turned out to be part of a complicated Ponzi scheme. Sometimes, I think China is very much like Japan before its economic bubble burst. In the late 80s, a traditional Japanese steel producer could make a fortune on the foreign exchange market. At that time, a smart trader could make 100 million yen a day. Now, China is going through the same thing. Every company, no matter what its business, is involved with real estate, with internet financial speculation, with blockchain. The original business model doesn't matter, as long as there's easy money to be made by doing something else. The same applies to ordinary citizens. When the stock market madness ended in 2015 and P2P opened its bloody mouth, the more courageous investors jumped into Bitcoin pump and dump. Everyone dreamt of getting rich overnight. In the middle of economic growth and materialism mania, human nature is fragile. My arguments with Zhu Jun were often related to money. I always suspected he wasn't really trying to advance. Unlike his colleagues, he didn't know how to make use of the resources available to him to bypass the system and create his own future. Why, he once asked me, do we have to have everything others have? Is happiness really tied to success, to fame, to wealth? Fange? I blink out of my reverie. Fange, what are you thinking about? A strong hand is on my shoulder. I look around to see that Bo is back beside me. A broad smile wreathes his face, a smile that could melt ice and snow. Is the gift delivered? Yes. Did you go down the chimney? This is a Mercedes, not a sleigh, and we haven't got any reindeer. I grin. Hey, I say, suddenly remembering something. Yes? What do music and snow have in common? Ah, you do have a good memory. Well, both of them are very beautiful, Bo says. Whether you are rich or poor, regardless of your gender or age, as long as you have a heart, you can feel their inner beauty. Like now, you mean? Yes, he says, just like now. I turn on my car stereo. Music fills the air, and outside the windows, the snow-covered streets of Beijing begin to glow beneath the lightning eastern sky.
Beijingle All the Way is copyrighted by Fei Wu. The translation is copyrighted by Josh Pachter. Music for this podcast, entitled Last Minute Rush, was obtained from Purple Planet Music. Mixing and editing were done by Ray Purdom and Jackie Sherbo. You can subscribe to Ellery Queen's Mystery Magazine, where you'll find more stories like this one by visiting our website at elleryqueenmysterymagazine.com.